going to be a story about a buck named Droopy. Kentucky opened up September 2nd, and temperatures were 90 degrees, so it was pretty aggressively hot. And I knew that could be a factor on whether or not we saw a shooter buck. Even though we had him on camera quite a bit in the evenings, we were kind of unsure if we were going to see a nice shooter buck that evening when we went out to hunt. And lo and behold, we did. So prior to the season, do a lot of prep work and preparation for the hunt. We shoot bow quite religiously, just prepping for anything and everything, quartering away shots, broadside, sometimes quartering two. Try not to make any mistakes every time you come out to shoot. Basically, you just want to have a pretty good, perfect day shooting, 10 shots in a row. You want to be on point. So I don't feel that I'm ready until I do that. So the farm we hunted is a family-owned farm. My grandfather bought it back in the 80s down in central Kentucky. And within the past 10 years, we decided to not run cows anymore, and we started picking up crops. And then this year, it just so happened to be soybeans. And usually when we plant soybeans, we always see a ton of deer in the early summer. So we have a tower blind out there in a pretty good area where we know that deer like to hang out. And so that was the point that we decided to put a camera up on, put some corn and mineral out in this area. And within one day of doing this, it was actually 10 days prior to season, we had a few good shooter bucks show up. So we ended up having 3 deer show up on camera, and we decided to give them names. We had Bullwinkle, which was a really nice square frame 8, and then we had Droopy, and he was a drop tine 8-pointer with just tons of trash on his brow tines, and he was just a beautiful deer. I mean, for the summertime, he was huge, and I would estimate him to be at least 6 years old. Yeah, I mean, he had the trash all over the place. But I mean, there was no question that this deer was an extremely old deer, very mature, just a lot of mass, biggest deer I've ever seen on this farm. So we arrived at the farm roughly
6 o'clock.
Yeah, right around 5:30, 5:45, maybe 6, and we started heading out to the blind. We didn't want to get out too early and just be miserable in the heat because we were hunting out of a tower blind and it's pretty much a hot box. So we tried to delay it as much as we could while trying to simultaneously catch everything on film. And so that was kind of the challenge we had, was beating the heat and being successful in the deer hunt as well, while catching it all on film. So we finally get to the blind. Immediately, it's just aggressively hot. I mean, literally, it's a hot box, 100 degrees. Yeah, we're sitting in a sauna, and it's just miserable. The sun was right in our face. The blind faces west, so it's just pretty much you catch the whole afternoon sun. So we tried to open up some windows, keep the door cracked, just to try to air it out some, catch a breeze. We did have a slight, like 6 to 14 mile per hour breeze that day out of the southwest. So we did have some wind coming in the windows, which helped us out with also trying to catch these deer coming off the creek bottoms. Pretty much immediately as soon as we got to the blind, there were just deer everywhere. Deer pouring out of every corner, coming from all sides, behind us, to the left, to the right, in front. And I mean, literally, they just poured out everywhere. So like right off the bat, we saw a few young does coming out, trickling out, and you could tell they had fawns with them. They weren't moving very far. We also had some younger bucks step out that, probably would be really nice deer in the next few years. But they ended up all coming in within 20 yards, and none of them smelled us, so it was great. We had the wind in our face, and we just sat there for a while and watched these deer. And They fed on the corn, fed on the beans, kind of took turns coming to the corn pile, licking on the trophy rock. So it was a cool sight to see, watching all these deer. And I had a feeling that we might get lucky tonight, just by the way things were going so far in the hunt, like getting there pretty much immediately and it being super hot, and we're seeing a ton of deer. So we watched these deer for a while, and we just never did have a shooter come out, and finally all these younger bucks just started to leave, and shooting light was fading pretty quick. As the shooting light started fading, I started getting more and more worried that maybe these bucks have gone hard-horned on us and started breaking off their normal summer patterns and going to different regions across farm, or maybe acorns were the preferred crop. It just so happened to fall that day. So anyways, when the light started to fade, we maybe had 15 minutes of shooting light left, and the bucks had moved on. Some of the other does had moved on out to the bigger field to feed on the soybeans, and we had a small group of does, 2 does and a fawn, come into the corn and just start feeding. And I think pretty much at that moment we kind of knew that it might be a good chance we're not going to see our shooter buck or our target bucks tonight. And I honestly started to get a little discouraged that it wasn't going to happen, and if I had to leave that tower blind that night, that I would disturb all the deer leaving and push them out of the field, and I didn't want to do that. Not without leaving with a target buck. So my buddy Parker, who was on the camera, he just happened to look up probably within 10 minutes of the shooting light getting ready to diminish on us, and he said, "Hey, there's a buck." And the buck came out right on the edge of the field, roughly 80 yards away, and so I put my rangefinder up to my eye and to get a better look at this buck, and sure enough, it was Droopy, the drop tine buck. So Droopy came out to the field, and he just stood there with his head up, just looking, and the does were looking back at him, and man, he was just a magnificent deer. You could just tell this was a mature buck. Had a huge rack on him, drop tine. I mean, you could see it plain as day that this was a big deer. So Droopy started slowly working his way to the corn pile that was within 30 yards of the tower blind where we were sitting. And one thing that kind of blew my mind is that usually sometimes you see deer like fight over resources or over corn. They'll hit each other or buck each other out of the way. When Droopy walked up to the corn pile, it was as if these does and fawns knew to get out of his way, and they just exited immediately. So as Droopy made it to the corn pile, I ranged him again, had him at 31 yards, dropped my rangefinder, and he honestly turned broadside just for a brief second. And I pulled back my bow, actually, getting ready to shoot, and then he turned his head back, quartering, basically head on, and I couldn't get a shot, and I actually had to lower my bow back down. And that where it got to me, it got a little risky because I made a little noise, and it seemed like he was looking right at us, and I was just scared to death that I may have made a mistake at that moment, but it turns out that that wasn't the case. So as Droopy stood there and ate corn, it was kind of pretty evident that he wasn't going to move from the position that he was in. It was either he was head on with us, or he was slightly quartering to, head on with us, slightly quartering to, and this went on for several minutes. And daylight was, or shooting hours were just, creeping up on us, that I was like, dude, here in a minute, man, we're probably not going to be able to shoot. it was getting that dark. I mean, even to the point of losing light on camera. It was just getting darker and darker every second that went by. And it just made both of us just extremely nervous. Like, you know, are we going to be able to pull this off? Not quite sure. And I remember just thinking in my head, you know, do I really want to take a quartering away or quartering two shot? And I know it can be done, but it's not ideal on a target buck situation. So eventually, I just trusted that I was good enough with my bow to make a good shot and make a lethal, ethical kill on this deer. And I knew the moment that he picked up his head and took one step that I was going to go ahead and send it. And he took one step to my left and opened up his shoulder for me. And I knew at that moment it was now or never. So my buddy Parker was trying to calm me down as I'm drawing back on this deer. You know, I made a decision to go ahead and make a good shot on him at this moment that he allowed to give us a good quartering two shot. I pulled back the bow, settled the pin right behind his shoulder where I could get just behind the shoulder blade and hopefully catch one lung, liver, and probably exit out of his back. And I fired the shot. So when I saw the arrow impact Droopy, it looked like a great shot. He mule kicked. I saw the arrow exit, and he went down toward the timber exactly where he came out from. I knew right off the bat it was a lethal shot, but the question was, how long would it be before I went and retrieved him? Well, it was a buck of a lifetime, and we had a lot of elements against us, the heat being 90 degrees, and I wanted to get a good retrieval of this deer and a good harvest, but I didn't want to bump him and lose him forever either. So some tough decisions were made when we went back to the truck. Yeah, so we get back to the truck, we start making phone calls, and we sent the video footage to a couple guys that I trust, and they reviewed it, tried to slow it down, and I had a lot of guys say, hey, that deer's dead right now. And I had some guys that were saying, hey, you know, you should play it safe, give him a few hours. You know, I don't think your deer's going to spoil if you just give him a few hours, especially if you just one-lunged or, you know, nicked the liver for sure. And so I just trusted my gut, and I said, you know what, I'm going to give this deer some time, and I'm probably going to call our buddies over at Sugar Camp Creek Outfitters to bring a dog just to be safe. A lot of what we did was just examine the footage and take time. We think it might be a one lung, some liver, guts. So the best thing to do is just back out and bring a dog for insurance. So that's what we did, and we got Sugar Creek Outfitters out here, Sugar Creek Outfitters, and I got a dog named Liv. Let's see if she can find it for us. He thinks we're in the chips, aka the money, so we'll see. So I showed the footage to the dog tracker, and Chris was like, dude, you're in the chips, bro. I'm telling you, you're in the chips. And that gave me a little bit of relief, because at the same time, it's like I really wanted to go track this deer. I felt like I made a great shot, but it was just the unknown. And to me, if you have any inkling of doubt, you didn't see the deer drop, you know, it's always good to back out, give a little bit of time, unless you have some severe elements against you, or time. So immediately Liv gets on the trail, and it's no question that she knows exactly where she's going. She followed right on the trail, and the funny thing was, there was no blood until we found Droopy just inside the timber, 20 yards.
Yeah. Hey. All that worrying for nothing.
Oh my gosh.
Look at that.
Drop time bucks down, dude. Well, that didn't take long at all, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's good.
Dude, he didn't open up at all. Dude, I hit him perfect.
Yeah.
Gosh, he's a beautiful one.
That's a heavy deer right there, boy.
That's a tank. Look at that wound channel. My gosh.
That thing is
Absolutely giant.
the mass on that is insane.
Squat down there and hold him up, pull that head up. Let's see.
Lo and behold, I finally got Droopy in my hands. So I do think one thing that probably did help me out quite a bit was having the G5 Mega Meat broadhead. It was an extremely sharp blade and very durable. That my arrow went completely through the animal, shoulder, and came out his rear. And it was a complete pass through from the beginning. And I had a lot of trust in my setup and arrows, that I was using heavy arrows and sharp broadhead, and I think that made all the difference. It was kind of a quick celebration finding this deer, because we had the elements against us, the heat, and we wanted to get the deer cleaned up, get him to the taxidermist, and be able to harvest the meat off of him. So it was pretty much a quick race against time to get this deer back to the truck and get him home to where we could process him. But so we honestly didn't get a whole lot of good pictures of him, but you know what, that's okay, because you know, I felt like we made a good harvest of this animal. And turns out Droopy didn't even go 60 yards before he piled up. Kind of looks like my season might be over for right now. You know, it came here quick, and it ended quicker.
So what's next?
Well, I do know we got a couple buddies that'll be out hunting with me, and I have a feeling that I'm going to be behind the camera on that at least till duck season rolls around, and I honestly can't wait. So I just appreciate all you guys tuning in to watch this video and watch me harvest this wonderful deer named Droopy. Even though I've never seen this deer in my life, it's just crazy to me that just throw up a camera and just you never know what you're going to see. And it just happened to be a buck of a lifetime. I mean, drop time buck and velvet. Oh, just a magnificent deer. But appreciate you guys, and if you guys like what you saw, make sure you like and subscribe, and hopefully we can bring you guys some more content. But it's you guys that keep us going, so thanks for subscribing.